Hello, Scorpio. Welcome to Catalyst Energies. My name is Dee. Thank you for joining me. I am so grateful that you are here. And truly, I am really grateful that even though I put up the forecast yesterday and recorded it, there was absolutely no sound. And thank you to the person who actually let me know. And there are so many lessons embedded in this one example, just about how important details really are. That there is such a necessity to pay attention to the details because it's so easy to miss them when we get really hyper focused on one aspect of what we're doing, that we miss an important detail that actually impacts the quality of the entire thing that we're doing. So there was this tiny little adjustment that needed to be made on the sound monitor that kept the sound from actually being recorded. So I did this whole report already, 90 minutes, a really deep dive into this forecast. And it wasn't until hours later that I checked a comment on YouTube. So thank you. I believe it was Be the Change. So show yourself, please, because I really am grateful that you brought it to my attention. And I'm also really grateful that I have the opportunity to provide this forecast again, because the changes that happen even in the last 24 hours have been so insightful, and the energy, my own energy and resonance, and just the resonance in general has shifted enough that I think that that was all so divinely orchestrated. So I'm not upset, a little bit bummed because I was really into that forecast, but it's all in divine timing. I really do trust that. And I think that this forecast is going to be even better as a result of that. So sometimes we don't have, sometimes there are these quote unquote accidents. And this is so wrapped up in the symbolism of this upcoming new moon in Scorpio, which is a partial solar eclipse, Scorpio, that it's all part of it, right? It's all part of our experience, and our experience is inner experiences are mirroring the outer experiences and vice versa. And this is where our alchemy and our own inner transmutation really comes about. So welcome, everyone. This forecast is for our upcoming new moon, which is a partial solar eclipse. It's on the 25th of October. And every month I offer the lunar transit forecast to the sign that is the representative of that particular lunar cycle. So the new moon is in Scorpio. So this report and forecast is for Scorpio sun, Scorpio moon, Scorpio rising. If you have strong stellium in Scorpio, especially if you are a Pluto in Scorpio person, because this is an eclipse, that means the nodes are involved. Pluto is all wrapped up into that soul karmic journey. So I would also offer that if you're a Pluto and Scorpio person, that this is going to be relevant to you as well. If you have progressions in Scorpio, or you're just trying to understand that Scorpio person in your life and what they're going through, this forecast is just going to give some insight into the astrological themes that are present from this new moon, which is an eclipse, leading up to our full moon lunar eclipse on November 8th, which is going to be at 16 degrees Taurus in a conjunction with Uranus. So this is a very intense time. It's something that we have been anticipating, I think many of us, for definitely since the spring, if not before. And we're going to take a look we're going to go back a little bit. We're going to take a look at the last lunar eclipse and the last lunar or eclipse cycle, and just kind of refresh ourselves about what that was about, because that also is coming to a close as we are opening the next eclipse portal. So these eclipses are the result of the lunar orbit and the moon at these points of new moon and full moon crossing the ecliptic plane, which is our path as the Earth around the sun. And so not only is the new moon and full moon part of the individual journey of inner transmutation and alchemy, where we are working with our own inner polarity represented by the sun and our moon, the eclipses represent a much deeper soul-related journey, because the nodes of the moon represent, in particular, the trajectory of our soul's evolution, the North Node pulling us towards that which will allow us to grow and learn and evolve at a soul level, and our South Node being the the karmic mastery, of what has already been learned from, accomplished, has evolved within our soul, and truly propels us forward. So the Draco constellation, or the dragon, is the representative of this undulating pattern of the lunar nodes, and represents the tail of the dragon, of where we're coming from, and the head of the dragon, which is what is pulling us towards this destination or in this direction in order to grow and evolve. So the whole collective right now is evolving along the axis of Scorpio into Taurus. So when we talk about this new moon partial solar eclipse, Scorpio, it's in our chart, and I'm going to speak from first person because I myself am a moon in Scorpio, also a Venus in Scorpio. So to just give you some insight onto my own personal journey in relevance to the general themes here, and just to let you know that I am on this pathway along with all the other Scorpio people that may find themselves here with this forecast. Okay, so just a quick reminder here that the lunar transit forecast is available now for Taurus and Scorpio sun, moon, and rising folks. This is a sale that I offer only to the people who are representing the lunar cycle of the current month. Now, the lunar transit forecast does exist for any sign, any time, and that's something that you can book at my website through catalystenergies.net. That's linked in the description box below, but the sale rate is only open to the Scorpio and Taurus people for this month, since you are truly representing the energy, true down to your personality, right to the essence of who you are, the persona that you project into the world, how you identify yourself. The subjective experience of you, Scorpio, is really strong in this lunar cycle, and the fact that it's an eclipse means it is so deeply wrapped around our own soul and karmic journey. In Scorpio, we are really going through it at an incredibly deep level. So this is available now. You can book at catalystenergies.net. That's in the description box below. The homepage will give you all of the directions in which to do so. You can now book and pay for services directly through my website. No more PayPal or Venmo unless you choose to use that, but the option is now directly available through my website. The other thing I want to share real quick before we get into this is now the eclipse reading itself, the eclipse season astrological forecast that's covering from October 25th out until April 20th, which is the beginning of the next lunar cycle, still in Scorpio and Taurus. It's going to be the last eclipse cycle that we experience, at least for the next 20 years or so, in the axis of Taurus and Scorpio. So if this interests you, you want to get an idea of how the next 6 months related to these themes is going to unfold for you, you can again go to catalystenergies.net and you can book directly from the website. It's $99. It's a 90-minute plus recording of your natal progress chart, any relevant starseed markings, and how that creates a pattern of meaning, and what the cosmic coordinates really are for your personal journey. So that's available as well. So now that we got that out of the way, let's get right into the astrology. Scorpio. Actually, there's two things that I want to reference in terms of the quote-unquote past, right? And to think of time, as we know, as not linear, but as a spiral, okay? It is certainly circular and cyclical, but with a spiral, we also understand that we are coming back around, but in a different position in space relative to where we've come from, right? So there's this evolutionary component as well. So go back to May and early June when we had the last eclipse cycle, which was in conjunction and in opposition of the Pleiades, right? And especially that eclipse, that full moon lunar eclipse in Scorpio that was happening in early June of this year, of 2022. Remember what was going on then, how you felt, what was being brought to your awareness emotionally and very intensely, but also something that was not very obvious, right? And knowing that these eclipses represent opportunities for even the soul to go into its deep hibernation, into the underworld, into our own shadow, not just in our own individual subconscious, but at a soul level, which makes it so intense. And then you pile the Scorpio thing on top of it, which is all intensity. There were experiences that many of us had, and including myself, that were so powerful. They were so poignant and almost overwhelming, but they also were not obvious where it was coming from. And we were really tasked with trusting that process. And now it's starting to come to a close. It's starting to find its resolution, and revolution as well. That was kind of an interesting slip, huh? What was going on for you then? What was happening? What types of experiences were really being brought to the surface emotionally that you may not have clearly seen or even had an idea of how you were going to adjust to the changing conditions, but knowing that that seed was planted at a soul level and really trusting the unfoldment and knowing that being on the divine pathway is truly the only way, and to allow it to guide all of us. So I encourage you and invite you to maybe reflect back on that time period, knowing that when the sun comes not only into Scorpio, but when the sun reaches 26 degrees of Scorpio later on in November, that we're really going to have an illumination of what at the time was a very distorted and shadowed but intense experience emotionally for us and intuitively, maybe psychically, maybe in our dreamscape. All of these things that are the way that the moon represents our ability to adjust to the world around us, how we feel our way through the world. So that's my first invitation. Second is a little bit more in the present moment, especially because I am recording this on the 22nd of October. And that is the Venus and Sun conjunction at 30 degrees Libra. By early Sunday morning, both of these bodies are going to be moving into Scorpio, and we're going to have that new moon solar eclipse at the early degrees of Scorpio, actually 2 degrees of Scorpio. So the other things that are happening besides that conjunction are Saturn is stationing direct as well this weekend, right? Saturn in your 4th house, Scorpio, in Aquarius. This has been, I think, for Scorpio people, a very unyielding and at times very kind of almost depressing type of pressure, internalized pressure, where the internal authority that Saturn represents, right? That wall, that scaffolding, that root system, the backbone in many ways, the bones of the reality that we are part of, has been in Aquarius, and the 4th house has been like a force field, and the pressure of it has been really intense. And it can really, in the 4th house in general, Saturn seems to really kind of create that crowbar separation emotionally between us and those we feel the most close to, usually family members. So Scorpio, I think it's been very difficult for us to really not buckle under that intense pressure of the inner crystallization. So when Saturn stations direct, I think that this is going to be this moment here, depending on which collective consciousness we are resonating with, right? Are we plugged into the Borg and to that kind of transhumanist AI resonance, or are we tapped into the higher collective consciousness where we are evolving into, right? Because that template already exists. It has always been, and it's a matter of our resonating with that template and with that frequency, right? If you look at the glyph for Aquarius, yes, it's the water bearer and you see the waves, but it's wavelengths. It is the wave function itself, right? Frequency, energy, vibration. And so when Saturn stations direct this weekend and is in actually an air trine with Mercury, which is in Libra in the 12th house for Scorpio people, it's we come to realize before this happens what it's all kind of been about. And if we can find our own inner journey, right? If we can take this inner journey, which Mercury in Libra has really been allowing for the Scorpio person to apply our cognition, our mental faculties, our sense of even communication and expression in many ways within the realm of the unseen, within the realm of the dreamland, our own Akash, right? The morphogenetic field, the woo, whatever you want to call that 12th house. And often it comes from a situation of almost forced isolation. The 12th house often is experienced when we feel isolated by way of circumstances that force us into it. So there are experiences of being hospitalized, experiences of being imprisoned in some way, and experiences of being in a spiritual prison. I think that's a really strong part of the 12th house too. And also imprisoned in our own delusions, imprisoned in the fantasy, imprisoned in the astral, and not really able to see anything beyond that. So for the Scorpio person, having Mercury here has been, at least in my experience, really, especially now that it's direct. You know, it came out, it was in retrograde, it came out of Libra back into Virgo, and then came back into the 12th house, and now is like full steam ahead. And in fact, is going to be moving into Scorpio as well very soon. The 4th house and Saturn here, I think, has been very isolating. It's been isolating in terms of those who we feel are part of our tribe, are part of our family, part of those that we identify as the dome or the protective mechanism, right, that surrounds us. And it has been isolating. I think it's been very difficult. And the Scorpio person is the intensity of that stems from a drive to get deeper, to get more close, right? To have a more significant communion in order to extract more power, or empowerment, or just a return on investment of ourselves. I think it has been very isolating. This trine with Mercury in the 12th house is really allowing in that moment as Saturn is about to station direct this weekend, I feel is a moment where we mentally and in our own consciousness align with the ways that we have diverged from the social order in order to attempt to control for what is out of balance, right? It's the idea of Robin Hood, right? Stealing from the rich and giving to the poor. There's a divergent quality of hiding hiding our actions because our actions are not socially sanctioned, okay? And it's been happening in the 12th house, okay, with Mercury here. And I think if we can put our focus here into this transcendent experience and really putting that energy towards discovering how we have been divergent in some ways, how we have maybe thought that our actions have, in our spiritual actions, right? The actions in terms of the collective unconscious, and maybe just being able to mentally wrap our minds around the ways that the collective has been unconsciously acting in this way of attempting to force the scales of balance, force the scales into balance by way of basically going against what on the surface, it seems like it is a noble cause, okay? And there are many people that are in the Gen X, and I actually wrote a whole post about this on social media, about this position of Libra, where the Sun was in a trine to Saturn, where Mercury is now in a trine to Saturn, Venus was in a trine to Saturn. They were all been in a trine to this degree of Saturn as it's been retrograde, in the ways that spiritually we have been renegotiating our sense of balance in this realm. And it has not been for nothing, right? And in fact, as Saturn is now about to station direct, that inner crystallization is about to become an outer force field that is allowing us to gather all of our resources in order to quench the forest fire, right? We may not be able to control for the lightning strike that starts burning down the forest, but civilization and the collective energy is able to muster all of the resources available in order to address this. And for the Scorpio person, it will be in the most intimate places, which is the fourth house, your home of and family of origin. Your current home life, right? You know, if you're married, you have children, like whatever that space is for you, that is the fourth house. It's where your character develops. It's where your self-esteem is really established. It's your inner and personal life. And this trine this weekend, like I said, Mercury and Saturn in this air trine is going to be really important to, stabilize the mental frequency in an area that is unseen, and a very much an area that is also not always seen, but deeply, deeply felt. And you may have felt very isolated from people or even yourself in terms of the fourth house. And soon that isolation is going to, you'll realize how much it has actually been creating or allowing us to fortify something in this area for those in our lives that maybe will need it, or maybe just fortifying that sense of connection to family, connection to, national identity, tribal identity, clan identity. All of these are kind of fourth house areas, and patriotism, for all of the ways that it has attempted to be demonized, fits into the fourth house, right? And this is where our personal power comes from. Of course, that can go sideways very easily, and everything has its spectrum. And the whole point is to understand both sides of something. It's going to be Saturn moving direct now that is going to bring that scaffolding and that backbone, those bones. And in Aquarius, it's not even really physical. It is truly resonant. It is truly based on a frequency and a magnetic kind of response to magnetic. So this weekend is really giving us a chance, especially, like I said, Venus and the Sun coming together at 30 degrees Libra. This is a blessing, and it's a blessing for the Scorpio person in their 12th house of being able to embody this illumination of true understanding. And true understanding comes from the experience of both sides of the scale. You can't intellectualize it. You can only really apply your knowledge of it once you've experienced this holistic realm of knowledge and experience. And you can read about, I'm sending out an email to my email list. If you're not on that, you can also get on that through catalystenergies.net. You get like 2-3 emails a month just letting you know what I have to offer, giving a little write-up of the astrology. And there's a link in that to more of an astronomical explanation of the Venus superior solar conjunction. But she's truly then going right into the underworld. And as much as Venus in Scorpio represents a very committed, kind of driven, focus on the space of communion, the depth of relationship, the empowerment that comes from that, how we can build trust, how we can cooperate with each other in order to create something more than what we put in. That's ultimately what Scorpio is driven to do and to be. She's at her detriment in Scorpio. She is in the sign opposite her home, which is Taurus and the 7th house. So Scorpio, the big takeaway here for everybody, but truly for us, is that this eclipse is going to really challenge our conceptualization of who we've been and letting that go, because the Scorpio person thrives on the intensity and the drive of getting to the bottom of something, getting to the depth of something. And the trap here, and I say this with full awareness in terms of my own personal journey here, is that it's ultimately bottomless. It's an abyss that has no bottom. And if we continue to sink and sink and sink, looking for this magic pill here, getting, this is the tumble down the rabbit hole that some people never are able to make their way out of. And a moon in Scorpio is a difficult emotional time. And with an eclipse involved, and the fact that we're going to have a full moon eclipse on the day of midterm elections, Scorpio people are going to really see, how comfortable they really are with their own darkness, especially because you have the South Node in our sign in the first house as well. So it's so easy to default back to that South Node, because that's where power has already been established and generated at a soul level. It's where we're comfortable because we have already mastered it. And it truly is the tail of the dragon providing the momentum forward. But there is such a tendency to, like I said, default back to that. And the Scorpio person is really being challenged to actually see that our evolution is in the mirror itself, is in the mirror of relationship. And with Uranus here, and being here for, not that, it's still going to be here for a little while longer, the stability of who we are in relationship is really, it is not there, right? And right now that kinetic energy is all under the surface with Uranus and its retrograde, right? So when it does station direct and starts moving forward, the reverberations are going to start coming up to the surface and really shifting the landscape in a visible way, in a palpable way, and definitely in an unexpected way. So the real value of the Scorpio person, the inherent value of the Scorpio person comes out in relationship, but we have to surrender the aspects of who we have been. And this is going to be the biggest challenge, not only for all of us at this eclipse season, but for the Scorpio person in general, especially if you are Pluto Scorpio person. If you are a millennial, because the investigation, the deep research, the drive, the hunger to get at the bottom of something, and for that to be your personality is really going to go through an experience of breaking open. And you can't put the genie back in the bottle once it happens, right? You can't put the perfume scent back in the bottle once it falls over and is broken. And there will be seeming accidents, which is why this report not actually being able to be posted or kept up because of an accident with the sound is just like this perfect analogy, right? It's the perfect representative symbolically of things will seem like accidents, and it will break us open, and it will challenge us to let that go, even, and to surrender the past of who we have been without bypassing the emotional experience of it, okay? So we're all going to go through it, but the Scorpio person is going to represent it through their very personality, through their sense of selfhood. So just a couple of notes here about the Sabian symbol for 2 degrees Scorpio is a delicate, just like I said, a delicate bottle of perfume lies broken, releasing its fragrance. So there's a lot of old feelings that are going to come forward that are going to be remembered. Old relationships are going to be left behind, but there may be some guilt. There's going to be some lingering about that. There's going to be some nostalgia. Some of these things are going to be very cherished, and we are going to really feel that in the process of what is new and greater coming forward. And it often does demand some sort of sacrifice. And for the Scorpio person, it's going to be the sacrifice of who we have been, okay? The past, we are surrendering the past. There's no getting around this, okay? But there is a difficulty with dealing with, even if it's a past that we have cherished, or it's a past that we are so, it's so dark that it's so difficult to even admit to ourselves that it's been there. We're coming into a realm of new feelings, but we have to go through the dark night. And this is really what this eclipse is going to be about. So Scorpio, for all of us, it's really important that we don't attempt to outsource necessarily this experience for ourselves by continuing to be that scorpionic person that is trying to fix what is broken, if that makes sense, about ourselves and through relationship. Because with Uranus involved in the 7th house, the fact that it rules Aquarius, and this is where Saturn is, and it's going to station direct, it's really not about attempting to fix anything or to mend what is broken. It will be revealed truly that it's more about taking that experience and finding a way to actually alchemize and transmute ourselves through the experience, okay? Now, Mercury in the 12th house, this is a great opportunity at the time of the eclipse, which is Tuesday, the 25th. This is a great opportunity to actually respond to the situation with some sort of positive outlook. That creativity, creation and manifestation is not something that we are doing as much as we are revealing what inherently and essentially is, right? There is divine timeline. There is natural law. There is the unfolding of God's fractal of reality. And our free will is how we choose to be in resonance or in dissonance with that unfolding. So we can respond to this in our minds and in our meditations, in our prayers, right? Mercury in the 12th house is putting that energy into the realms of the unseen and the cosmic and transcendental. So responding to life's renewals with this sense of enthusiasm, perhaps a sense of joy, a sense of again, revealing what essentially is, instead of taking on this more ego-centered aspect of I am manifesting, right? It's more about I am aligning and resonant with the highest, with the divine unfoldment. And this, I think, is going to give the Scorpio person the ability to at least find some joy and some positive outlook, and but it won't be necessarily outward, right? It'll be something that we kind of reveal to ourselves and are in that space where it's just us and divine source, right? Prayer, meditation, in our practice, whatever it is. And sometimes it's in the experience of everything being dissolved down into that oneness. And that happens again in the 12th house through some sort of isolating experience, okay? And again, as I talked about, Saturn in the 4th house has been very isolating in a deep emotional way that is now we're going to realize, wow, that process reinforced and fortified my sense of authority, determination, my sense of, reaching a goal in ways that we probably could not have really anticipated until it started moving forward and we see what it's up against, okay? So Mercury is really working in our favor. And remember, Mercury or Hermes, Anubis, right? The idea here is that this is the only archetype that was able to move into the underworld and out. The idea that our own consciousness is able to traverse these realms because of, light. Light infuses the darkness. It's not darkness does not extinguish light. Light infuses the darkness, and light can leave the darkness as well, right? That's the function of light, and that's what Mercury's and Hermes represents, the travel on the beam of light, the ability to actually move at the speed of light. So light exits and enters darkness. It's not the other way around. So this is a real asset to the Scorpio person. Now, the other thing that is just really important to consider, well, there's a lot of things here that's really important to consider, is that Mars is the co-ruler of Scorpio. So we have Pluto, and this is why I say Pluto and Scorpio people this is really relevant to you. This is not me. I am a Pluto and Libra person. So the millennial generation, the Pluto and Scorpio people, especially the first half, 0 to 15 degrees in particular, this is much more of a transpersonal kind of large scale connection to Scorpio. But Mars, as the ruler of Scorpio, represents our individual action, our outward momentum, the penetration into the world, the action, superhero energy, the warrior, right? And represents what individually we are taking action toward. Mars is in the 8th house for the Scorpio person. It's in Gemini. And at the end of October, on the 30th, it's going to station retrograde. Okay? So in the 8th house, which is really the Scorpionic house, Mars is really representing here this opportunity to be brave, right? To really be brave, because Mars, and to utilize our own subjective I am as momentum for the spark of divinity within us, right? Our potency, our desire, acting on that in a way that is stripping everything back in the realm of the shadow to the base elements of light and dark, right? We're talking about Gemini and the polarity here. And this is where it will station retrograde, at this degree of stripping everything down to its bare essentials, to our pure selfhood, which is identifying for the Scorpio person the pure selfhood of the light and the dark in this area. So Scorpio, there's a sense of fearlessness that a Scorpio person has for going into this space, okay? And Mars stationing direct or retrograde at the end of October is very easily we can turn on ourselves. Especially if we have not really been doing our shadow, really doing our shadow work, not the surface level doing our shadow work, but really coming to terms with the very deep soul level shadow work that many starseeds are very familiar with. Okay, so we have this retrograde really is setting the tone here for possibly turning on ourselves, right? And this is where that bravery to face this, look at ourselves in the mirror of our power dynamics in relationships, how we have participated in creating the power or the resources in relationship, regardless of what they are, and to use that energy with a sense of bravery. Right? To be brave, to be courageous, to use that energy constructively instead of destructively in that area. And I assure you, people will be using it destructively, and it will be influenced and inflamed in order to entice people to be destructive in this area and be self-destructive. Okay? And Scorpio can be very self-destructive because of the intensity of the bottomless pit that we are sinking endlessly into as Scorpio people. Especially if you have a moon in Scorpio, you're no stranger to the depth of this. So this Mars connection here is very important. And in fact, Mercury is going to be in a trine to Mars at this degree in right around the time that it's going to station retrograde. Let's just familiarize ourselves here for just a moment to be very clear on the dates. Yes, the 26th. So right after the eclipse, but before it becomes, before Mars stations to retrograde. Mercury will be in a trine. And Mercury in the 12th house, again, this is in conjunction with Arcturus, right? This is an adeptness of working with polarity in a way where consciousness transcends the duality. And it really is able to do that very easily in something like the 12th house, okay? Because there is no duality here. You're returning to the one source in the 12th house, yeah? Connection to source. There is no boundary here. And it's only truly the adept that can function in this realm without getting lost in the woo, so to speak, or drowning in our own karma in many ways. So this Mercury Mars trine on the 26th, right after this eclipse, is going to again be a stabilizing force for the air and mental energy around this, okay? That when we are able to strip down to the essence of who we are, this is really going to I would say in this case, very harmoniously influence the mind's capacity to spin that wheel, to spin the yin yang to the point where they change into each other, right? And that's the true measure of an adept alchemist. And the Arcturians, right? This is a great opportunity to tap into the Arcturian energy because this degree of Gemini not only is in conjunction with Orion, but it's also in a trine to Arcturus. So this energy is a really good guidance right now in terms of how do we use the duality and the polarity in our lives to trigger our own inner transmutation? And really, how can we strip everything down in terms of the power of our and the resource and power of our relationships down to the studs, right? Down to the bare essentials of who we are, and how that influences and stabilizes our own mental processes of becoming an adept in this area, right? This is not for the uninitiated, right? And to realize here that there is so much support for this process. And this is, again, before Mars stations retrograde, because we're really going to need this, because Mars will then we will start to turn in on ourselves, and many people will be very self-destructive. And so take advantage of this trine to really get into your own Akash, your own morphogenic field, your own karmic realms, the multidimensional realms that the 12th house represents. And you will have to go into your own space, right? You're not going to find it outside of you, okay? You just won't. It's just the way it works. And Mars has been really leading us to outsource it. And this is where it hits the wall. And it's like, nope, it's time to inner source this and be able to master this. So the Arcturians in particular, and Arcturian starseeds, they really do hold the keys to balance in the universe, the actual application of structures, of design, of how things are organized, and teaching, and a very resonant throat chakra. This is really important to consider, and a great guidance. So if you're an Arcturian starseed, or you really connect with the Arcturians in some way, the mental energy in those realms of your practice, your prayers, your meditation, that quiet space where it's just you and divine source, however you do that for yourself, you can call on the guidance of the Arcturians as a resonant group to really give you maybe some practical insight into how to do this. But it's really about stripping all of the superficialities away in order to focus on exactly what it is that you are balancing out and becoming adept with in this realm of the 12th house, Scorpio. We really have our work cut out for us. It's no joke, okay? Because being able to gracefully as much as we can move through this eclipse cycle is really going to have an impact on the collective in a way that you may not even realize until after the fact, right? By the time we get to April and May, it may be more like, oh, I see now how this is actually being utilized at a collective level. But not everything is meant to be put out there either, so guard and take care of this energy within your own process, okay? Now, the other thing that's going to be happening too this week, just leading up to our first quarter moon, is that Mercury, again, is going to be in a square to Pluto. Now, Pluto has already stationed direct. And I think many Scorpio people, I know I can say this for myself, have pre-waved this eclipse cycle because Pluto had stationed direct. So that machinery turned right on. We felt it. Shit went sideways. And of course, the Mars-Neptune square was a big slap in the face along with that, right? But it's really Pluto that turned on, that is starting the machinery of destruction that leads to regeneration. But you have to go through the decay and the surrendering of the past, and the seed has to be embedded in the soil, and the death process has to happen in order to reinforce the medium. There has to be resources in the medium for the seed to grow later. So we have to go through this process. And as soon as Pluto went direct, I think on the 8th of October, right before the full moon that was conjunct Chiron in the 6th house for Scorpio. I mean, this is where the wounds are really showing up, is in the daily works and labors, right? In the actual commitment to the process of your own healing. Again, it's really easy for Scorpio people to outsource that process into the drive to cooperation, communion, relationship, because that is just the tendency as a Scorpio person. But it's the spark of your own divinity, your potency, your impulse to be really shines in the work that you're doing on yourself or ourselves. It's just that Chiron has been poking at that inner child wound in that area. And, strangely enough, for how intense Scorpio people are in terms of I can face the shadow, I can hold the evil, right? I can face it head on. When it comes to actually doing the work on ourselves, that inner child is just like, I don't want to deal with that shit, right? That is too painful, right? That is something I don't want to deal with. And I think many of us can really relate to this right now. And many of us actually, since that full moon, it's been releasing, whether we've wanted to release it or not. I can't tell you how many people it's been consistently like, yeah, the weekend was great. And then all hell broke loose. And I know for me personally, all week has been like that. Just, so much release and grief and crying and sobbing and just real pain, right? That's the work right there. And that's the work that a Scorpio person, if they can embrace it, it's amazing. But Chiron has really brought those victim wounds right up to the surface, and has been something that I think a lot of Scorpio people have been avoiding, to be perfectly honest, because it really challenges the persona that we project out into the world of being like this intense person that can really handle all of this. And it's not that we can't. It's just we also have to really honor and acknowledge where we've been and really honor it, right? Honor that inner child wounding. Realize that has all been part of the process of our own healing. So anyway, that's a little bit of a digression, but I just wanted to bring up that Chiron is in the 6th house for Scorpio, and that full moon has still been sitting with us. I mean, we're still in that lunar cycle, and so it's been incredibly powerful, and the tendency and the temptation has to been act out, right, in a way that, again, could be more destructive to the overall picture, and really getting pulled into the story of that victim or savior narrative. And again, it's really easy for Scorpio to outsource that into something else, okay? So, and really to do damage to yourself by just sinking into the hole and, just being a loosh factory without even realizing it. So, Now, but Pluto, on the other hand, and remember that Mars also rules Aries, so there's all this involved as well with Mars and Aries and that Chiron full moon. Pluto, on the other hand, in the third house, this has been it's when Pluto turned back on, it was just like, okay, well, what you think you know, Scorpio, is going, the machinery is turning back on, and it is being chopped to pieces, because the third house is our consciousness, how it grows, how we learn, how we make sense of the world around us, what's happening in our immediate environment, and truly, what it is that is our how we gain our knowledge, how we learn, the data that comes in and out. And with Pluto in a square to Mercury, the tendency here is, especially for Scorpio people, is going to be to get really into the argument, right? Into, I know what I'm talking about, and not realizing, but we will, right? Because the square to Mercury over here in the 12th house, as we're going to see here. As you look over here, Mercury in the 12th house is really just like the sun was in a square to this position, just like Venus was in a square to this position. Can we take the bird's eye view? Can we find the transcendent realization that is able to see truly the big picture from our mind's eye in the biggest of pictures, which is everything, the 12th house, the entire collective unconscious? We are going to be really challenged, and we have been challenged over and over. But for Scorpio people, this is going to be probably the biggest challenge, because our immediate reality, our knowledge base, our individual consciousness in this lifetime is going through demolition, right? And the tendency that we're going to feel here is to get pulled into the argument. We're going to want to battle it out to be right for the sake of being right, instead of using our mind's eye, right? The Mercury here in the 12th house to focus on what we're actually doing here, which is evolving, right? Which is going through our soul's evolution, which is what Pluto really instigates, is the creation of something new in that spiral of time by way of the process of death and destruction to regeneration and metamorphosis. So the Scorpio people are going to be holding on to being right. And this Mercury square Pluto is a real challenge to that. And so just be mindful of that too. And there's nothing wrong with that intensity, but realize that the third house being Capricorn and having Pluto here, every institution, all of them, right? From the economy to the governments to the medical and healthcare system, all of it is going to be rendered ash, okay? The tower is coming down, and it is, when we base everything on that, it's going to be very difficult to allow ourselves to transform along with it. So just Scorpio, chances are you are right? Because the ability to sink down and get to the bottom of something is part of, good investigative journalists tend to be Scorpios, okay? Because there is that drive to get to the bottom of something. But remember that it's not just your consciousness that's doing it. And this is something that we really have to learn to get past, and we will, right? And this square from Mercury in the 12th house like this, also still in about a 3-degree orb with Arcturus. It's also opposite Andromeda, so if you have any Andromeda stuff, especially Andromeda Galaxy, if you have any of that in your chart, you're going to really feel the tension and the kind of diametric opposition to that freedom fighter energy of like, I am on the front lines of this evolution. It's really important that we take advantage of these moments with the mind's eye, having the bird's eye view, okay? And seeing the biggest picture so that we don't find ourselves also having a mental breakdown with Pluto going through the third house and destroying everything that we have identified as reality. And even if you think you're awake, it's never ending, right? It's a process. So it's very advisable to, consider that as well, and to allow what you think you know and what you identify as your knowledge base to also be open to regeneration, okay? And that square to Mercury, yes, it's going to be difficult, but it's going to be really, really important, okay? So we're going to have our first quarter moon on the 1st of November, which is a week after the eclipse, okay? So the eclipse happens. We have all these transits, like I said, with Mercury square Pluto, Mercury in a trine to Mars, and then and by this point, the Sun and Venus are in Scorpio. So we move a week ahead, and we're now officially in November, and we're actually going to have not only a T square or a first quarter moon square to the Sun. It's going to be in a T square with Uranus and the North Node in the 7th house. So this is actually going to bring that energy a lot more to the surface of the mirror of relationships. So let's go back a couple hours so we can get some nice bold lines here and get an idea of what this is really looking like. So the tendency here with a first quarter square, right? It's a crisis in action. What are we going to do? Now, we had an eclipse, so things are distorted. There is a ring of fire, because it's a partial solar eclipse. It's not a full and total solar eclipse where everything is blocked out. So there is some light here. But just like Johnny Cash's song of Ring of Fire, we have to jump in without getting burned, right? We have to jump through that portal into the void or the infinite, but knowing that there at least is some measure of illumination to light our way, to be like, this is where the portal is at least. So there's something there. And just for reference on the global stage, number one, the path of totality for this eclipse is over Russia and Eastern Europe. So this is pretty relevant, okay? Number two, speaking of that as well, it's right on the ascendant of Vladimir Putin. So there are global aspects that will absolutely be impacted, and you can bet your bottom dollar, you can bet your ass, whatever you want to think about, how you want to be thinking or conceptualizing this, that story, that set of circumstances that has been unfolding really since February, right? And when the first move into Ukraine happened, it's already written into the situation, and the people who are making all manner of decisions, regardless of what they are in relation to this situation, know exactly what's going on, and they know that this is going to be, one of those potent moments of opportunity to execute something, right? So just be aware of that too, right? And the path of totality being exactly over that part of the world is it's pretty significant. I almost was swearing, sorry. I got the mouth of a sailor. What can I say? My dad was a sailor. And he truly had a mouth of a sailor. He was very interesting growing up in my household. So when we get to this first quarter moon, what are we going to do, right? The moon is half illuminated, so we don't get the full illumination, but we still have a very powerful inner experience of tension, right, with that square. The tendency here is going to be, with the sun in our sign, in the first house here, to really use that scorpionic energy to fix things that have been broken about us, right? We're going to want to put that bottle back together and also be a symbol of that for other people in some ways, right? And the moon in Aquarius is in the 4th house, right? Along with Saturn, that's now direct, okay? And what I think is interesting about this is that this is kind of bringing us to a reality check of it's time to move on from that. And how are we going to transmute this? How are we going to go from the symbol into the action that it represents? And it's going to be something that we are sensitive to in our most vulnerable places, which is home, family, personal life, our inner life, the core of who we are. Acting out the vision. This is the Sabian symbol. The flag turns into an eagle. And Aquarius is very connected to the United States. It's the moon. It's the natal moon of the U.S. natal chart, right? The Aquarius zodiac or constellation is very connected. Aquila, the eagle, is in the zodiac sign. There are stars of this constellation, Aquila, the eagle, right? This is the eagle of Zeus, right? Carries Zeus's thunderbolt down from the heavens. It's very related to the United States as well, especially in terms of space exploration, to military focus, these types of things. You know, how are we turning the symbol into action? And to be in the fourth house for Scorpio, it's pretty significant when it comes to those themes of patriotism, national identity, tribal or clan identity, and of course your family, your most intimate relationships that really hold you and that you are loyal and faithful to. So while the Scorpio person is really identified with themselves and being a symbol of in their identity, and really like a dentist going to work to fix the problems that they also caused, right? You know, that's the thing about dentistry, is it's a necessity based on that comes out of a society that is creating the same problems that a dentist is needed for, right? Which is all the shit that makes our teeth messed up, right? Sugar and whatever else. So the tendency, Scorpio, is at this first quarter moon is going to be like, okay, I'm going to put that bottle back together, and let's put this bottle back together, guys, and be a real symbol of it. And the moon's going to be like, maybe this is about something else. And with Saturn here, and the fact that this is in a T-square really to what's happening in the 7th house, I would invite you to make the connection between you, yourself, ourselves, Scorpio, and the mirror of relationship. Whatever that relationship is, whatever it is, it's interpersonal, and it has to do with what comes out of you as a result of this relationship, okay? So... and of course, Uranus rules Aquarius, so it'll be unexpected. There will be underlying shifts in the landscape, in resources, in material value, and truly in the value and worth of the Scorpio person in relation to their relationships, right? And so this is going to be very interesting on November 1st. Now, on the 5th is another pretty significant date, November 5th, 1955. You guys know what that's all about. Boy, the amount of disclosure in those series of movies really blows my mind, actually. I'm going to have to do like a whole thing on the Back to the Future series in terms of the astrology of that date and everything else. So the reason I bring up November 5th is... leading up to this point, we're going to have a number of conjunctions, as you can see here, with the South Node, so, or K2, right, the tail of the dragon. So the Sun will conjunct the South Node, Venus is going to conjunct the South Node. You can see Mercury is now fully into Scorpio as well, and so they're all going to cross the South Node. And this actually is, I think, where the Scorpio persona and the archetype and the energy of the Scorpio person, I think that the connection to the South Node, the way that I'm reading it right now, and the really strong hit that I'm getting, is that this is actually a moment where the ability to establish new connections is going to be a very powerful it's just going to be a powerful moment on in terms of your conscious or your creative expression of the Sun and who you are. Venus, your value and worth of all experiences, and then eventually with Mercury, you know, the way that you are conceptualizing yourself. The ability to establish new and deeper connections is something that the Scorpio person is very familiar with. And there is a necessity to not only establish new connections if they need to be established, but to be responsible to take care of them. It's not enough to just be like, okay, well, I'm just going to dig a new power line now or whatever. They need to be tended to. They need to be secured. They need to be, honored if you want them to continue to work. And I think that this connection with Venus, the Sun, and eventually Mercury in early November is going to remind the Scorpio person where their power has been coming from. But again, it's about about providing the momentum towards the soul's evolutionary process. And again, not to default back onto, well, I'll just dig deeper into myself and make new connections without any consideration of the mirror itself and what it's providing, okay? So, and then when we get to the 5th, right? So we're going to have Venus on the 2nd, it's conjunct, and then we have the 3rd, the 4th, and then we get to the 5th, which is where the Sun is conjunct the South Node, and Venus will be opposite Uranus, okay? Venus that is ruling the sign Uranus is in, Venus in her detriment in Scorpio, and this degree is 17 to 18 degrees Scorpio. And the opposition here is, and the tendency, we may have a sense here that we have reached some sort of consummation, that we have fulfilled some sort of, destiny within ourselves. And Uranus is going to be like, are you sure? Because I am going to just shift the entire landscape to the point where it's going to cleanse your palate in your own consciousness, to the point where how could you possibly, it's not an end, it's a beginning, right? This is going to be a big theme here for this Venus opposite Uranus, especially because Venus is so weak and not, she is not very dignified in Scorpio. She is driven, but she can become obsessed with relationship. And in this case, really obsessed with, the value of coming around to fulfillment in some ways. And this can be very destabilizing with Uranus in this opposition, right? And the Uranus part is going to want we're going to want to break free, right? And that's the other part of it too, is that maybe this is a moment here where that drive to find consummation, to establish, a pat on the back in some ways, to accept that there are aspects about who we have been that are really coming to fruition, but we can't necessarily stay there and not acknowledge that there's real activation happening in terms of who we are in relationship as Scorpio people. So November 5th is going to be really intense and really jarring and very unexpected changes into how we value ourselves and who we think we are. So then when we move forward to the 6th, we're leading up to our full moon. You can see that the Sun then comes into like I said, the Sun is in conjunction with the South Node, and there's going to be a Mercury cazimi, right, along with the full moon lunar eclipse. And you can see that Lilith is in Cancer, in late Cancer. And so all of this Procyon energy is coming back around, opposite Pluto as well. That's going to be very relevant to this story. But you can see how the opposition with the full moon now is starting to really grow leading up to the eclipse. So like I said, it's a full moon lunar eclipse. It's going to be in 16 degrees Taurus, and the Sun at 16 degrees of Scorpio, and the moon will be conjunct Uranus within a degree, and so it's pretty much in conjunction with Uranus at this point. And so again, the fervent reaching out, right? This conscious acceptance of relationship that we're really identified with and really being a symbol of in some ways is really going to find, it's really going to be challenged by the fact that what has come through the past truly is not enough to confirm where we're going. And with Uranus involved, we are really talking about our evolution and our quantum leap into the future of who we are. And it may be so, and again, with those eclipses, there's distortion, right? It's not fully illuminated. So it's going to be very shocking. And of course, it's on the midterm election. So you can bet that there's going to be all kinds of shocking things happening. Things not going the way that we anticipate. Maybe there is going to be a very shocking revelation, and really discouraging people is probably putting it lightly, especially since the Sun in conjunction with 16 degrees of Scorpio is for the Scorpio person is what really identifying with this conscious acceptance of relationship, a choice, really reaching out, a warmth of feeling, intentionally having faith in the relationships or the faith in the journey. And I just think that it's not going to go the way that many people want it to go on every side of the, at all sides, because Uranus is the unexpected. And to have the full moon there, it's really going to, it's really going to trigger that quantum leap, and emotionally and deeply we will feel it, but it won't be really obvious to our awareness because of the distortion of the eclipse. And then the next 6 months is really going to be this very deep soul level work, going to work in a way that is not obvious to our awareness. So, and that takes us into the full moon. Like I said, we also have the Cazimi, right? Mercury and the sun in a conjunction, and they'll be in a conjunction 16 to 17 degrees of Scorpio. And at the very least, we have that will bring us to an self-awareness of and a very brilliant aha moment that our sense of self and what we are transmuting and creating is based on the experience of the divine source within us. It comes and starts from within us. And so you can already kind of feel where I'm going here with this midterm election energy, with this eclipse, that it is not going to go the way that people think that it will go or should go or they want it to go. But we have this little kernel of an aha moment here that is leading us to realize that we are the agents of our own transmutation. And this is a really important point that I think is worth keeping, putting a pin in and remembering when the 8th rolls around. And there's one more transit here, if I remember correctly, that is, and that Mercury will also be opposite of Uranus as well. And this is 16 to 17 degrees, same thing, 16 to 17 degrees of Taurus, 16 to 17 degrees of Scorpio. That, Mercury and the sun may be together, but it's opposition to Uranus, which is kind of the next octave. Mercury represents our own consciousness and its resonance, where Uranus is the opening and a gateway to our quantum awareness and our higher cosmic consciousness and collective consciousness. So, we're still going to we're still going to be kind of like shocked into the experience of needing to sit under the Bodhi tree, right? And that's really what 17 degrees Taurus really represents, is the present moment of the duality within ourselves, needing to just be sat with. And again, Uranus is that agent of change and sudden and shocking revelation in some ways. So that's also it's going to be very shocking. Whatever it is on the 8th, it's going to be very shocking all around. And our ability to work with that with full illumination of our own feelings about it is what's going to be a struggle because of the eclipse. So, my friends, Scorpio, I think that's all I have for all of us in this particular forecast. So just a reminder again, if you're interested in the lunar transit forecast, if you're interested in the eclipse astrology forecast, all of that information is at my website. It's linked in the description box below. If you are interested in following me on social media, where I post more written things about astrology and give you access to when I'm broadcasting, you can find everything you need is in the description box below. You guys know the drill, of course. So if you are finding value in this work, you want to support this channel growing and truly growing to reach more people, you can do so by subscribing, by liking this video, by commenting on it, by sharing it with others. It really does impact the algorithm as much as we can do it. There's a lot of competition with much bigger platforms around some of these issues. So But if you find value in it, chances are somebody else is too. And people do really find this channel through the algorithm and the recommended feed. So anything you can do there really does help. Of course, if you're interested in being part of the Starseed Fellowship or the Catalyst Classroom, there's information also below and ways to register for that. And of course, my website has all the information you need about all of those things. So you are invited to check it out and see what Catalyst Energies has to offer for you. So my friends, thank you so much for being here. I truly appreciate each and every one of you, Scorpio. We are doing some difficult, deep work right now, and it is embedding at the deepest soul level. So take care, friends. Truly take care of yourselves the best you can. Know that we each have to walk this path on our own, but we also have each other to support and be each other's cheerleader in the process, and to really be compassionate and showing unconditional love for each other. So I love you guys. Thank you for being here, and I'll see you on the next video. Bye.